One day, a great man stood at the peak of a towering mountain, gazing at the distant horizon. He had reached the summit of glory, but something seemed to be missing. Is true power only found in reaching the top? Or are there hidden aspects that everyone else can't see? History tells us stories of men who achieved greatness but fell faster than they rose. Why? Was it due to their decisions or the way they fought? In this video, we will dive into 5 philosophical rules that are the secret to power, which many people fail to recognize. These are the 5 rules used by great individuals to rule the world, and some lost them, ruining their future. So what are these rules, and how can they change your life? Get ready, because we will reveal secrets from history, but don't think they're just lessons. They are keys. If you understand them, you won't be the same. 5 rules for power and success from the greatest figures in history. Avoid what you cannot obtain. Ignore it to reduce its power. How can neglect become a decisive weapon? Create stunning scenes that amaze others. How do you create an unforgettable impression and control situations? Think as you like, but act like the rest. The secret lies in combining authenticity with blending into your environment. Stirring jealousy is dangerous, so maintain your humility. Why can the greatness of others be a threat to you? Never do a favor for anyone without knowing the consequences. How do you protect yourself from the repercussions of your help? Don't leave now. Every second here is filled with knowledge that could change your future. Get ready to dive deep into history and philosophy, because what you will discover here, most people don't know. Rule 36. Avoid what you can't obtain. Ignore it to diminish its power. In our world governed by desires, it seems that everything we don't have shines brighter, as if its glow is actually a reflection of our deprivation from it. However, true reflection arises from asking, is everything we don't have worth possessing? Or is it the glow of desire that creates the value of the thing? Dionysius and Hannibal, when desire turns into a burden. Let's take an example from ancient history. Hannibal, the great Carthaginian general who troubled Rome for decades. A genius in the art of war, he crossed the Alps with elephants and his army, all driven by revenge from a previous defeat. Rome was not just a political adversary to him, but a symbol of everything his homeland had been deprived of. Yet, what was the outcome? When Hannibal reached the gates of Rome, he couldn't breach them. Years of fighting, advancing, and victories ended in a slow tragedy. The closer he got to Rome, the further he drifted politically. Even his fellow countrymen abandoned him, fearing his power. Thus, Rome transformed from a dream into a curse, from an ambition into a burden, from a goal into a haunting shadow. Had Hannibal ignored Rome after his first major victory, had he withdrawn and focused on building a strong, economically and culturally thriving Carthage, perhaps the pages of history would have been written differently. The art of ignorance, the hidden weapon of the powerful. Ignoring is not a weakness, but an art. The desire for what you don't have may lead you to squander what you already possess. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest philosopher kings, wrote in his meditations, "Do not let what you do not have spoil what you already have." He, who sat upon the throne of a vast empire, could have desired to acquire everything, but instead, he trained himself to accept the impermanence of things, to see every desire as a test and every craving as a burden. In this way, he maintained his balance amidst the storm. The inverse equation of desire, desire by nature, increases the more we chase it. But when it is neglected, it fades. Like a fire that needs fuel from attention. Ignoring what you cannot obtain extinguishes its flame within you and diminishes its value, even in the eyes of others. What feels like a helplessness today may become something fleeting tomorrow, if only you decide to look through the window of renunciation, not the window of greed. Rule 37. Create stunning scenes that dazzle others. Reality is not what is, but what it appears to be. In the world of humans, truth does not always prevail. Often, impression does. The image is stronger than reality, and the effect precedes depth. Thus, the theater has always been a tool of kings before it was an art form. Stunning scenes create awe, shape a halo, and weave a presence around their creator, even if they are just a human being. Napoleon Bonaparte, the master of visual presence. Napoleon was not the tallest of leaders. In fact, he was relatively short, but he made himself appear taller in the eyes of the people. He would ride high on his horse during moments of appearance, always dressed in his full imperial regalia, speaking confidently before his soldiers, as though narrating a fate that could not be escaped. One of the most famous scenes Napoleon created was when he returned from his exile on the island of Elba. In a scene that rivaled mythical drama, he stood before an army sent to arrest him, took off his hat, and shouted, "If you want to kill your emperor, here I am before you." Instead of firing, they cheered his name and joined him. He did not win with a sword in that moment, but with the scene itself. He knew that the eye precedes the heart, and that awe is the key to obedience. The Alhambra, an unforgettable marvel. Let's head east to Andalusia, where the Alhambra Palace in Granada stands as one of the greatest visual testaments to the genius of creating a scene. No ambassador or envoy who entered it ever returned without being awestruck, as if they had stepped out of a dream. The palace was built in such a way that those inside felt a sense of awe, as if the place itself were alive, watching you, whispering to you through its decorations. This palace was not just a residence, but a message. Those who dwell here are above mere humans, at the peak of taste and power. What good is power if you don't dress it in amazement? This is what the kings of the Nasrid dynasty understood, and they maintained their rule for decades, not through the strength of their armies, but through the power of impression. The philosophy of the scene, between truth and symbol. The German philosopher Nietzsche wrote, "People do not want the truth, but the story that helps them endure reality." Here lies the essence of the rule. The scene is a visual story. If you create a scene that dazzles them, you will see how people attach their hearts to you, not for anything specific, but simply because you know how to show what remains unsaid. Even in our daily lives, those who carefully arrange their words, appearance, and environment impose respect without having to speak. Grandeur is not always arrogance, Sometimes it's necessary to establish authority, especially if you're in a position of leadership or influence. The lesson? Be the sculptor of your image. Do not leave your image to chance. Choose your moments carefully. Create situations that are told as stories, and pay attention to the small details that form your aura. This is not falsification, but rather an amplification of the truth for the sake of impact. And remember, people do not remember the details, but the feeling you leave with them. Rule 38. Think as you like, but act like the rest. Freedom of thought does not mean freedom of behavior. In a world shaped by systems and driven by collective instincts, standing out publicly becomes a risk, and thinking outside the herd can be an act of heroism or suicide. Since thought is invisible, but revealed through actions, the wisest of people have concealed their thoughts behind masks of obedience, not out of cowardice, but out of wisdom. Socrates. Think out loud, die in silence. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, did not hide his thoughts. He would roam the streets of Athens, asking questions, dismantling assumptions, and igniting the fire of doubt in people's minds. But he forgot, or perhaps ignored, that people do not like those who destroy their foundations. The result? He was condemned for corrupting the youth and sentenced to death. Had he simply acted like the rest, keeping his thoughts within safe circles, he might have survived to write, as Plato did after him. But he chose to live and die as a walking idea. The price of free thought was the poisoned cup. Galileo. Bending does not mean defeat. Centuries after Socrates, Galileo was born in an era that did not tolerate science if it contradicted the Church. After supporting Copernicus's theory that the Earth revolves around the sun, he was summoned by the Inquisition and given two choices: either recant his views or be burned at the stake. Galileo bent. He appeared to recant. He said what they wanted to hear. But when he rose from his trial, he whispered the words that ensured his immortality. And yet, it moves. He thought as he wished, but he acted like the rest. He lived and kept his science alive. He chose to keep the fire burning inside, rather than let them burn him with it. Machiavelli, separating thought from action. In his book, The Prince, Machiavelli did not express his own beliefs as much as he described the reality as it was. He did not say, "Be kind," but instead said, "Be what people want to see, not what you are." In his private letters, he was a man who believed in freedom, but in his books, he dressed his texts in the robe of political realism. He lived with two faces, not out of hypocrisy, but because the times did not allow for just one. Duality without hypocrisy. Acting like the rest is not hypocrisy if the thought is sincere. It is the cunning of the weak in the face of tyranny, and the wisdom of the sage in a time of deception. Even Plato wrote about the ideal city that never existed, because he knew that purity has no place in cities ruled by the mob. What you do in front of others is not a betrayal of yourself, but a protection of it. Keep the flame of your thoughts burning, but do not place it in the wind. Between the madman and the genius, there's a fine line. The genius who shouts his idea in the market may be stoned, while the one who whispers it in the ear of a powerful man creates a revolution. Always remember, thought is a bird, but the body is a cage. Be careful. not to fly where your wings cannot be seen, or they will break rather than soar. Rule 39. Jealousy is dangerous, so maintain your humility. Jealousy is a slow death, seen only when it strikes. Jealousy is a quiet fire, not ignited by malice, but by success. Those who attain glory are not always killed by the sword of an enemy. Often, their spirit is devoured by those closest to them, those who cannot bear the spotlight shining on someone else. Your humility does not protect you from harm, but it deceives jealousy, making you appear without brilliance. Joseph, envy, the first crime against the soul. Let's begin with a divine story. Prophet Joseph, peace be upon him, saw a dream in which the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were prostrating to him. An innocent dream, but enough to spark a fire of jealousy in his brothers' hearts. They could not bear the idea of him being the special one among them. So, they threw him into a well, not because he was evil, but because he was better. Here we understand that greatness is not always a reward. Sometimes it becomes an accusation. Joseph only survived because he remained humble. Even when he became the treasurer of Egypt, he did not boast of his greatness, but forgave and gave. Humility does not erase greatness, but it softens its glow, preventing it from unintentionally hurting others. The Abbasids and Abu Muslim killing glory because it shone too brightly. In the early days of the Abbasid state, a Persian man named Abu Muslim al-Khurasani rose to prominence. He was the true reason for the downfall of the Umayyad dynasty, with his army and political skills. Yet, he was not a caliph. He served behind the scenes. After the victory, his name shone brighter than that of the caliph. Whispers began, then fear, then jealousy. Caliph Abu Ja'far al-Mansur ordered his execution, not because he had betrayed, but because his light shone too brightly. The lesson, even in the world of sultans, no one can tolerate having their shadow obscured by another's greatness, even if that person is the most loyal. Humility would have given Abu Muslim a longer life, or at least a death with less betrayal. Humility as a political weapon. Humility is not just a religious virtue, but a strategy for survival. A man like Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, despite uniting the Islamic world and defeating the Crusaders, was not known for boasting. He could have gloried in every speech, but instead, he chose asceticism in praise and silence in victory. And when he entered Jerusalem, he did not slaughter, nor did he massacre. He prayed and remained silent. He left his enemies stunned and let history speak for him. He left his enemies stunned and let. This is humility. It does not diminish your stature, but lifts you up without anyone realizing you are above them. The logic of envy. People do not hate the oppressor, but those who excel beyond them. Jealousy does not strike you because you wronged others, but because you succeeded. People forgive mistakes, but they do not easily forgive those who succeed without them. Therefore, if you want to live long at the peaks, do not shine brighter than necessary. Beware of appearing perfect, even if you are. Leave a gap. Let others see you as human, not a legend. Legends are worshipped and then slain. The lesson: do not sleep in the light of glory. Sleep in its shadow. Rise, but do not elevate yourself. Achieve, but do not make noise. Let others discover your greatness over time, not in a moment. And as the poet said, when a young man reaches the peaks of greatness, he should remain humble as though he has not ascended. Rule 40. Do not do a favor for anyone without understanding the consequences. A favor is not always a good deed. Sometimes it's the beginning of the end. It's said that goodness is never forgotten, but the reality is that a favor weighs on the heart before it brings joy. When you save someone, you don't just plant gratitude, but you awaken in their heart a sense of inferiority. They may spend their life trying to free themselves from your kindness, even at the cost of dethroning you. The story of Marius and Sulla, a favor that turned into blood. In the Roman Republic, General Gaius Marius, a nobleman, adopted an ambitious young man from the noble class named Sulla and opened the doors of glory for him. But Sulla could not bear having his success attributed to another. He wanted the glory for himself alone. So, he turned against his mentor, and a civil war broke out between the two men, burning Rome. It ended with Sulla's victory. But he didn't forget the favor. He erased it. He entered history as the first man to enter Rome with an army, not to save it, but to rid himself of his past. The lesson? When you save someone, make sure they won't see your extended hand as support, but as a shadow that covers them. Louis XIV, the minister who created an enemy with one favor. The great French king, Louis XIV, known as the Sun King, relied in the early years of his reign on a smart and wealthy minister named Nicolas Fouquet. Fouquet was a man of refined taste and immense wealth who helped the king govern the country and even funded some of his expenses. But his fatal mistake wasn't in governance. It was in showing gratitude. He invited the king to a lavish party at his palace, a display of art, beauty, and luxury that even surpassed the king's own palace. Louis felt jealous. He believed that Fouquet wanted to prove he was more powerful, more beautiful, or even more generous than him. The next day, he ordered Fouquet to be imprisoned for life, and the man died in a cold cell. Why? Because he gave a favor that was too grand, at the wrong moment, to a man who could not bear credit being attributed to anyone else. A favor without wisdom is a burden on its giver. A favor must be weighed carefully. Who do you give it to? When do you give it? And how do you give it? Not everyone you feed will thank you, and not everyone you lift will support you when you fall. The philosopher Lao Tzu in Taoism wrote, "Help people, but do not let them see that you are the cause of their salvation, or they will hate themselves, and then hate your face." Gratitude is a fragile feeling, and memory is shorter than you think. The poet Al-Mutanabi said, "If you honor the noble, you will possess him. But if you honor the mean, he will rebel." But who is noble and who is mean? No one knows until it's too late. That's why the wise say, do not do a favor for someone who has nothing to lose, because those who fear nothing value nothing. The lesson: a favor needs wisdom equal to the intention of goodness. If you wish to do good, choose the time, the person, and the path that will not turn your favor into a charge against you. Do not elevate someone who cannot stay at the top, for they might fall and take you down with them. Do good when it is a secret. Withdraw your hand if you feel it has become a burden to the other party. The favor that is remembered is forgotten, but the favor that is concealed is immortal. And so, our journey ends with 5 rules that seem like simple lessons, yet they were written in the blood of kings, the tears of philosophers, and the betrayal of friends. From Hannibal to Galileo, from Abu Muslim to Fouquet, all were great, but they forgot that life is not governed by good intentions alone, but by understanding people, the cunning of life, and the game of shadows. Think as you wish, but walk as the people walk. Do good, but do not expect gratitude. Amaze people, but do not burn them with your light. Avoid what you cannot obtain until it stops chasing you. And remain humble so as not to awaken the sleeping beast in others' eyes, envy.